Hello everyone, this is Jimmy and welcome back to episode 11 of Omnifactory. So yesterday we set up our deep mob learning system to support 20 simulation chambers, and the 10 that we are running shulkers on have now reached self-aware tier, which means a 30% chance of getting their pristine matter. Now we've been running that pristine matter through the loot fabricators, and when you look at that, we have over 47,000 diamonds. Those diamonds, if you remember what was once one numismatic dynamo, is now 16, and they're all powered by 1 lapidary calibration and 5 fuel catalyzer augments. They produce up to 6,200-ish RF a tick, but right now they're producing about half that because, well, that's all the power our base demands. This difference is, overhead we have left to grow before we have to worry about power again. And right now I'm pretty sure we're producing diamonds significantly faster than this system is consuming it, so we can also add a few more for free. The other thing we did, if you remember, was set up tungsten automation. And when you look at that, we have over 700 tungsten steel. With that, we can now make our tungsten steel coils. I would like to make a set to upgrade our nichrome coils in our multi-smelter so that it can cook even more stuff. And we can use those coils to start making the high-tier thermal expansion metals. Right, so if we look at... where are they? Here they are. Signalum, lumium, and indarium. They take 4,000, 4,500, and lastly 6,400. Actually, is that too high for tungsten steel? Probably should have looked this up earlier, but hey, we get to learn together. Tungsten steel coil block is only 4,500, so we actually need the next tier coil to cook indarium. What would that be? After tungsten steel is HSSG, and that is still not enough. We have to go all the way up to Naquata coil to cook it. So I guess we can't do indarium yet. We'll set indarium aside and just tackle lumium and signalum for now. So to do these, we need 2 blast furnaces. They're actually extremely slow. If you look at this cook time, right? It's only an MV recipe, but it's 640 seconds at MV. If we overclock it to HV, it'll be a little under half that, so like 200. It'll end up being somewhere around 250. That's still a long time to make 1 ingot, and we're going to need a lot of this. So how about... I'm trying to think how many sets of blast furnaces we want to make. We can either run them on HV and make more of them, or run them on EV. You know what, for now, let's run 1 blast furnace of each on EV. So let me go make the components for that, and I'll be right back. It looks like I ran into a bit of a snag when encoding the patterns for lumium and signalum. Lumium looks fine. We can craft this. It's just tin, silver, copper, iron. But for signalum, it uses a little bit of this red coal, and up until now, we've been using so little red coal that I was happy just, doing it manually and hitting the manual mill while it was processing. But if we want to automate this, well, I can't, spend all day hitting the manual mill, right? So let's look into generating some grid power so that we can automate the resonator. And of the grid power options, the Dragon Egg Mill is by far the best one. And in fact, it's not even all that bad. Everything here I think we can make. In fact, I even have the auto crafting pattern registered. So we need 2 stoneburnt, a block of nether stars, and 12 Ursonia crystals. I'll let you guess which of these is the most difficult to make. Good news is, we don't have to go cheese another 9 withers because nether stars are craftable. So let me start putting these patterns in, and I'm pretty sure all the components for this we actually already can, or we've already have the auto crafting patterns in for. I just have to register them. So let's see how quickly we can make our 9 nether stars. So that's 7 auto crafting recipes. I guess we need one for nether star blocks. 8 recipes. And would you look at that, we can craft a block of nether stars. And in fact, we can probably even craft 20 blocks of nether stars. You know what? Give me 20 blocks of nether stars. I'm feeling rich today. And this will just take it a minute. Alright, so while that goes, the other thing we needed was Restonia crystals, which is blocks of redstone. This I haven't automated yet, just because, I guess no reason in particular. It's very easy to do by hand, and we don't have to do it very often. Yoink. And what was the other component we needed for this? 2 stone burnt. Well, that we have to do manually still. This will hopefully be the last time we have to sit here hitting the manual mill for, 20, 30 seconds. And there we have it, 2 stone burnt. Which means the dragon egg mill is now craftable. It has to make 3 eyes of redstone. Alright, looks like this recipe will take it a little bit, so I'll come back when it's done. And 1 dragon egg mill. So now we just need it to sit somewhere where no one will ever bother it. How about right here? And there we go. Now it's producing 500 grid power, which is probably enough for the rest of the game, although if we need a second one, it's not that bad to make. Next up, let's set up a resonator to always be processing coal into red coal. Now, red coal is a pretty neat thing. Once this starts going, I'll show you. Do I have channels here? 28. We're almost out, but 28 is less than 32. So it's a little slow, but that's why I want it to just be always processing. There are speed upgrades we can make. And they don't seem too bad. Maybe we'll make some of these somewhere along the line too. But this red coal stuff, you see it boosts fuel efficiency depending on the amount of GP you have. And since we have 500, it actually boosts fuel efficiency a lot. So this stuff ends up making for decent furnace fuels, because if you look at that, it burns for 625% extra time, which it's like almost a block of coal, except it's a single piece of coal. Pretty cool, huh? Anyways, let me connect this to a storage bus. And then once we have that hooked up, we should be able to auto-craft our signalum, I believe it was for. And lastly, we just need the storage bus. Alright, so that'll just always run in the background until that drawer fills up. And you know what? Let's get a emerald upgrade for the drawer, just so that it basically never fills up. And with that, hopefully we should be able to craft a good amount of signalum blend. Yep. So next thing then we have to configure our blast furnaces to actually cook that stuff. So I already built them out, but I haven't configured all the buses yet. To make signalum and lumium, I believe they use this primal mana stuff in addition to the blend. So we'll put primal mana in the fluid export buses. And signalum and lumium blend in the item export buses. Alright, we also need our level emitters to disable them. And since this is more or less the same process as those blast furnaces and those blast furnaces, I'll just come back when it's done. And here we have it, fully complete signalum and lumium automation. If you look, these cook extremely slowly, even when running at extreme voltage. So there's nothing to do about this but wait. But that's fine. For now, we don't need them in extreme quantities. I think the first thing we would do with, well, we need a little bit of lumium to make our what were they? The tier 4 circuits? Not that one. Was it tier 5? Yeah, to make these. So these take 2 lumium and 2 tungsten steel plates each, which I think we can actually do. We probably have 2 lumium. But initially we wanted to make these for diesel power, but looking at our power situation, now that we've upgraded now that we've turned on all of these numismatics, I don't think we actually need to upgrade our diesel quite yet. So maybe we'll put that off for a little bit longer. Let's see what we can do next then. So I think we can improve our circuit board crafting by crafting these glowstone doped silicon boules, but to do that, we need some noble gases. Right, if we look at the recipe for glowstone doped monocrystalline silicon boule, it takes argon gas as well as silicon and glowstone. Well, these are obviously very easy, but argon only comes from cryogenic air distillation of noble gases, which only comes from cryogenic air distillation of liquid air. So some of you may have noticed that I've had these freezers built here for a couple, for the last episode or so. And what they're doing is they're producing this liquid air for me. And what I need to do then is to take this liquid air and distill it into its components. So if we look at the quest here for the cryogenic air distillation, this is a very large multi-block that we have to build. So let me gather up all the components for it, and I'll show you what the multi-block looks like as we build it. And we're back with all the components for hopefully 2 cryogenic air distillers, one to distill air and one to distill noble gases. And these are pretty large, as I said. I think they're like 7 by 7 base, and we need 2 of them. So this area here that I just flattened out, I think will be our air distilling location. So let me show you what this multi-block looks like. And when I say it's large, I really mean it's huge. Look at that. It's a 7 by 7 base and something like, I don't know, 15, 20 tiles tall. So let's build it. With any luck, this will face the right way. Do I want it to face that way? Sure, why not, right? We can put it there. Sure, why not? It's nice when you have the preview because then you can just place the blocks where they appear like they belong, and if it doesn't work, if you put the wrong block there, it'll look like this, and you'll know you put the wrong block there. So this multi-block, I don't know, it consists of a lot of pieces and it's pretty slow, so I want to get it started now. Some of the products from it, namely the very rare gases, are extremely valuable because we'll need them in great quantities later on to make omnium. Whoops, that doesn't go there. Would you look at that? I forgot something. Sure, we can do these. And there's our first cryogenic air distiller. It takes liquid air in. So let me send that. And then it'll produce the various outputs back here. Give me a second to, I guess, let me set up the other one off camera and I'll hook up the ME system to it. Alright, here's our second distillation tower, and I've hooked up the ME system to it. All we have to do now is tell it to start sending air. And when this fills up sufficiently, I think it takes like 53 buckets for a batch. So pretty soon, this should start. Not enough energy. Oh, right. Turns out you have to plug your machines in. Let me do that as well. Where do I have energy here? There we go. Now it should start. Yep, and it pretty quickly starts running air distillation. So if we look at the outputs, they'll come into these output hatches. So this one has noble gas, that one has nitrogen, that one's an energy hatch, this one has oxygen, that one has carbon dioxide, and that one also has nitrogen. So what we have to do then is take those and send them into these tanks, and I would like to filter on the input. So let me grab a few fluid filters and set this up. So after putting the conduits down and the filters in and adding a trash can to handle the overflow, I think our air distiller, at least our first air distiller, is done. Of this distiller, the only product we really care about are the noble gases. The rest, the carbon dioxide, is practically useless. Oxygen we produce, elsewhere as well, but I guess the oxygen isn't useless, but we produce it elsewhere as well. And the nitrogen is basically useless in the quantities we get it in. We get way more nitrogen than we can ever dream of using. So the important part again are these noble gases, and what we're going to do with those is send them into this distiller where we can distill them into their component gases. So if we look at noble gases, right, they're made of argon, xenon, helium, krypton, and argon, neon, helium, krypton, and xenon. Of these, argon is one we need right now, and thankfully it's the one that's most abundant because it'll let us make those glowstone doped monocrystalline silicon boules. So we have to wait a little bit until this processes 53 batches as this slowly fills up. So I'll be back when this is ready to run its first cycle. And we're almost there. Whoop, looks like it just started processing. So this process takes a little bit longer, but when it's done, we'll have our first few buckets of each of the noble gases. And I think the quest here wants us to pick up a bucket of argon, so I'll do that. %. In the meantime, I also set up all the filters for this, just so that we can filter off we can store all the gases into each of these quantum tanks. And there is a trash can to handle overflow if it happens to process enough. I highly doubt any fluid will end up in that trash can. Almost there. Alright, here's our first batch of argon. And there's our quest complete. So I'm going to set up a blast furnace that will stock full of argon so that we can process our monocrystalline or our glowstone doped silicon boules in it. And I'll be right back. Alright, here we are. I added another blast furnace to the end of our blast furnace row here. This one's a little awkward because it takes 2 item inputs, right? Silicon dust as well as glowstone dust, but it also takes a fluid input. So I kind of started running out of places to put the ports. I ended up putting the fluid input port underneath. It's a little weird. I'm usually not a big fan of putting ports in places you can't access, but I feel like this is the only choice you really have for now. when doing these adjacent blast furnaces, you can't use the ports or the spots on the side, right? Because they would be shared. So you only get the spots on top and bottom. But that's fine. This takes a long time to make these silicon boules. So once one is done, I can configure this filter and we can start looking into what we use it for. And our first silicon boule is done. So if we look at the uses for it, the only thing you can do with the silicon boule itself is to cut it into wafers. And the wafers can be used to make many of the same circuits that we were already making. You see RAM and CPU wafers, but compared to before where we get one wafer per, like one CPU wafer per raw wafer, doing it with these gets you 4 per. So we get an increased yield, which is nice. But let's configure these to automatically be cut and send this one here. This should cut up pretty quickly. And then we can set the termination condition for this blast furnace. So maybe when we have, I don't know, let's say 500 of these in stock, we can stop making them. There we go. So this should keep working for a little while longer. So with that out of the way, that should make our circuits a little bit cheaper to make. I think our next huge project will be ore processing. And that's right, I've put off ore processing long enough. We're now in the IV, the insane voltage tier, which means we've reached the magical tier where macerator byproducts are 100% yield. So let's look at the way we want to do most of our ore processing. And to do that, let's grab a piece of ore as a sample. So let's look at iron ore first. Iron ore, when you process it, you have, well, the first step is always to pulverize it. For almost every ore, you start by pulverizing it. When you pulverize it, you get crushed iron, you get crushed ore and a byproduct dust. Now with this ore, you actually have two choices of what to do. You can either pulverize it again, in which case you get an impure dust and byproduct dust, or you can wash it, in which case you get a purified ore and a byproduct dust. If you pulverize it a second time, the dust you get here is, as far as I can tell, always the same as the dust you get the first time around. So if you like this dust, you just pulverize it twice. And then after that, you centrifuge it. You get a small amount of byproduct, and then you have the you have the regular dust to work with. But if you don't like this byproduct dust, say you don't want nickel dust, what you can do is run the crushed ore through an ore washer. It'll give you a small amount of that one, but it'll cause you to get a different dust when you pulverize the purified ore. So in the case of iron, we get to choose between nickel dust and tin dust for a second byproduct. And in terms of yield, almost the entire yield is based on your main product and your pulverizer byproducts. In the end of the day, your ore washer and your centrifuge byproduct at the end have very little impact on your total yield. So for most ores, what you want to do is consider whether you would rather have the washed byproduct the second time or the unwashed byproduct. And in the case of iron, I would rather have the unwashed byproduct, right? I'd rather have nickel dust. But if we look at some other ores, I'm actually not sure what ores we even have. Let's take a look at galena maybe. So if you do this, you get sulfur dust. And if you wash it, you would instead get silver dust. So in this case, I would rather have silver dust than sulfur dust. So I would wash the ore before I crush it the second time. Anyways, to support that workflow, we need a bunch of macerators, a bunch of ore washers, and a bunch of centrifuges. Because we have to use IV tier macerators, I'm thinking we'll build maybe 16 of them and then just not run the overclock on them. Because if we overclock them, they draw 8,000 or 8 EU a tick, which is 3,200 RF a tick. And our power system simply cannot support that yet. So for the time being, we'll just run a bunch of not overclock macerators, I think. So I have a lot of crafting ahead of me, but let me build these machines. In the process of making the macerators and stuff, I realized that we ran out of tungsten. So without tungsten, we're kind of stuck. Now, I could go to the end and mine up some tungsten, but that's kind of a lot of work, and we're at the point where we can automatically, or we can get tungsten from these tier 2 microminers. So if we look at it, each tier 2 microminer would get us 3 stacks of scheelite ore and 3 stacks of tungstate ore, both of which are effectively tungsten ores, as well as a bunch of other ores that will process later. So let's see what it'll take to make one of these. Really, it's not all that much stuff, right? Everything here we've already made for something or another. So I'll go and code the recipe for this, but we have to craft it in this extended crafting table. The good news is once you make one, you can make infinite of them. So the first one doesn't look all that bad. I think we have all the machines we need to make it. I just have to encode some recipes. So I'll go do that now. Here we have all the components for a tier 2 microminer and the pattern for it. Now, if you remember, this is made in the 5x5 crafting grid, which we can't automate quite yet. We don't have the tech level for that yet. But for now, here's my workaround. I put the pattern into this interface that pushes the materials into this storage crate. So when let me put these away and request a tier 2 microminer. So when I request one of them, it'll dump all the materials into here. Oh, I put them in here. Let me fix that. We'll just move you. Anyways, once we get the materials, we can grab them out by hand and then just put them into the crafting table, craft it, and then throw it back in here to clear the request. So with that, let's see if we can request 9 more of these. We need pulsating crystals and electrum plates. Alright, electrum plates are easy. And pulsating crystals, I'll just make a few more by hand, but for now, let's just request a few less of these. Can I get 7? Yes, I can. So this will go on and craft while I go figure out, I guess for now I'll just make a handful more pulsating crystals by hand. So our automation for the microminers has been running for about a minute now, and if you look here, almost all the vast majority of the remaining steps are in the compressor. So even with running 8 compressors in parallel, the compressors still are bottlenecked by a massive margin. But for now, there's nothing we can really do about it. We can, go up to 16, but it won't make a huge difference yet. I think in a couple energy tiers, I'll upgrade them to perhaps like insane voltage compressors and go up to 16 at the same time so that it can make a meaningful difference. Anyways, this should be done pretty soon, maybe another 2 or 3 minutes, and we'll come back then. And all our components are ready. All we have to do is put it together. So, yoink, there we go. 8 titanium plated microminers. I'll go ahead and just cancel the crafting request so that it knows that it's done, and then we can fly on over to here and send them into our microverse projector, not microwave projector. And this will turn them into ores. So remember, what we were really after from these are the rutile or the scheelite and tungstate ores so that we can continue our titanium production. And with that, let's wrap up today's episode here. Unfortunately, we weren't quite able to get around to completing our ore processing line today, but that's fine because I think we have all the infrastructure we need now to set up an efficient and robust ore processing system that'll last us through the rest of the game. So, I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.